Mine are being shut in because they're starting redoing all my patio and everything outside. So it's crazy. So we're madly talking about dogs here, and I've just had a little message from Vic saying we've gone live. So maybe the conversation about dogs may have to wait till another time. Although I am going to say before we even kick off, I have persuaded the builders that I have in my outside my house that they're not allowed to operate any machinery or do any banging or anything for the next hour. So I've got that quiet. I can't guarantee that my two little dogs will stay quiet all the time, but we have to hope that it's going to be reasonably peaceful. So there we go.
Absolutely. Absolutely the same here. If the camera suddenly slides sideways, it's because Mr. Burt Reynolds, the dog, has stepped on a cable. We'll figure it out. We'll recover.
We will. So, Mac, welcome. It's really good of you to give an hour of your time to come and share your thoughts and just have a general conversation with me. I always look forward to these. It's really special, having an hour's conversation with really special people who I've worked with and become friends with. It's really great. So I really thank you. What time is it for you right now?
It is 7:01 in the morning, which I think is part of why my dog is confused, because at this hour, he's usually either been walked and we've left, or we're all still asleep. So he can't really split the difference.
Well, it's very good of you to get up early so that you can come and do this with me. I appreciate it. So what I think I'd very much like to just say today, I always forget to say this at the beginning. I'm going to ask you to share a little bit about, well, as much as you like, about yourself, your life, how you got to where you are now, why you decided to start pursuing this passion for leadership that I've noticed grow in you considerably since I've known you. And if people get to know a bit about you, but one of the things I always forget to say at the beginning is if anybody's got any questions or things they might like to ask, please type it in. I might have to put my spectacles on because otherwise reading it could be a little bit tricky. So if I see a question come up, please do fire in whatever questions. If there's something you'd like me to ask Mac, just chuck it up there, or there's something you want to challenge that one of us has said, please don't hold back. Put up whatever you feel that you'd like to put up. So, Mac, we met, God, how many years ago is it now? I'm so bad about time. 3 years? 4 years?
Yeah, it is actually fairly recent as these things go, but it feels sort of accelerated for a number of reasons. I mean, and before I forget, I would invite people to also, if they have any questions for you, Penny, you do these things, and every time I watch one, I think, oh, but they should ask Penny this, they should ask Penny that. So I don't want anyone. First of all, I have no real awareness that there's anyone here but us, but I don't want anyone who might be watching to not ask a question because they think this is just about me. I would happily cede my time to hear more about you. Yeah, so we met, gosh, I don't know, three or 4 years ago now. I did the virtual program first, and Glenn was my trainer for that. And then, which I guess we should talk about in itself. But then National Grid, where I work, decided to go full bore and have internal trainers to share the program. And so I then got to do the live PLP with Peter, and then I did the CTP with Tash. And somewhere in all of that, I got to meet you.
That's absolutely right. So, Mac, tell us a little bit about your life and, before the Living Leader and how you got to where you are now. And we've had somebody asking a question already. So you'll be able to, having shared a little bit about you and your life, you could move on to this. It's from Lauren saying, Max, so excited to see you and Penny here this morning. Can you tell us how the Living Leader has impacted your life? So start with your life first, and then you've got that big question after.
Sure. No, yeah, just a tiny little thing. So the funny thing to me sort of looking back is that I wound up nowhere that I thought I was going to wind up. And yet I couldn't be happier to be here. I work at National Grid now, which is, I can't imagine anyone doesn't know, we're a natural gas and electricity delivery utility operating in both the UK and the US, quite large, tens of thousands of people globally. And what I do there is I manage a team of continuous process improvement professionals within the customer organization. So all of the customer facing functions, my team helps make all of those better, which is kind of what I have finally discovered is kind of my driving reason for doing things anyway, is I find it deeply satisfying and rewarding to make things better. And that is not where I started going, or so I thought. So my dad, most of his career was in the military. He was in the Air Force, or later he was full-time active Air National Guard. And my mom did a variety of things. Much of her career was in sort of the HR area. She was a HR VP for a bank for a while, and very supportive, ridiculously supportive. They wanted a big family. All they got was me, so I got like 6 kids worth of support. And so, you know, very much focused on education and ideas and all of this stuff. And so I was one of those kids who, like, you know, would read the newspaper at 6 or 7 for the amusement of their friends. And so I did pretty well in school and that kind of thing, but I didn't really have a North Star until I got into high school. I thought I was going to go into biology because that had coolest ideas. And then our school got a new drama teacher and a new drama program, and we started doing shows. And I got into that. I don't even remember how. I must have auditioned. But before the first week of rehearsal was over, it just clicked for me. I was like, yeah, that's it. That's what I want to do. And so after my parents finished having their respective heart attacks and trying to talk me out of it for a very brief amount of time, they came around and got super supportive about that as well. And so I went to school for it. I went to school 3 times for theater. I have an undergraduate degree. I have 2 different graduate degrees, one in arts administration and one in directing for the stage. And that was my first career. I wanted to be a director who worked with writers to create new plays, which is a bit like saying I want to be an astronaut who only does this one very specific hard thing, because there's just not that much work out there. And most of it is taken by people who already are successful at it. So, but I did it until my mid-40s. I mean, that was my first career, and I had a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun being a theater kid. I got to work on Broadway once. When I was still acting, I appeared in an Oscar-winning film once, totally uncredited extra, but I was there. So I was having a lot of fun, but you may have heard this once or twice, the arts don't pay particularly well, particularly in America. So I had a lot of temp jobs along the way. I have done everything. I've worked for lawyers, I've worked for accountants, I've worked in machine shops, I've waited tables, I've done all of it. And one of the temp jobs that I had along the way was at this company called Keyspan, which is now part of National Grid. And what I wound up doing was I was the executive assistant in rotation for all of the SVPs, because in those days the SVPs all sat on the same floor of the building, and all of the assistants sat next to each other. And so if you did a good job for one while they were on vacation, then the next one who went on vacation would hire you again. So I did that for years, and I wound up getting this weird secondhand education about the energy industry, because I was helping these what you would call the top team, you know, the Band-Aids, the senior vice presidents. I was being their assistant for weeks at a time, and so I figured out sort of how things piece together at a very rudimentary level. But it was really rewarding. it's very easy to get passionate about that, because what you do makes everything possible for everyone else. We keep the lights on, we keep the heat on. You know, whoever you love in your life, you are making their life possible on some level. So it's really easy to be passionate about that. So career one, theater kid until my mid 40s. And then I had some actually very boring medical stuff happened that meant I needed really good health insurance, and I needed a steady paycheck, and I needed them both really fast. And the VP that I was a mere VP that I was temping for at that time at Keyspan, said, just take this job, right? You've been temping here for years. You know how the place works. It's a job. It has insurance. It has a paycheck. Take that. And so I did, and very quickly sort of pivoted into being this energy business person, having had no real background, which is one of my limiting beliefs that I struggle with all the time. And I know it holds me back even now, this idea in the back of my head that I'm some theater kid. I couldn't possibly have anything to contribute to all of these very grown-up energy professionals. But it turns out that working in process improvement is a lot like directing shows. National Grid rolled out a very vigorous process improvement initiative throughout the enterprise. And because I was assisting an SVP at that point, I was helping him set it up for his organization. And as soon as I started to like suss what that was about, it was another one of those moments that it just clicked for me. I'm like, yeah, that's great. We figure out how to make everybody's life better and easier and faster and do more for the company and I mean more for the customer, and have the company charge them less money. It was great. It was a win all around. So I went to my boss and I said, you got to replace me. I'm going to go do that. So I went and did that. And I did that for a while, first as a practitioner, and then later as a manager of other practitioners, which is what I do now. And along the way, we started doing the Living Leader at National Grid. Badar brought that in, who you've had on this series, and Helen Burt, who was the chief customer officer at the time, was an instant convert. You've had Helen on to speak as well. And so they said, yeah, we're going to do this. And so I got to become a Living Leader trainer as part of our internal rollout. And again, like, I know I keep saying it, so it sounds like it happens all the time, but I count 3. It was that moment of, this works. This my brain gets this, and I see instantly how it makes things better for people. And so, yeah, and so now I'm it's not my job, but one of my things that I do in addition to my job is deliver the Living Leader training inside National Grid and occasionally outside, which has been just an absolute joy. So thank you for that. I lost the thread. What were we talking about? Oh, how has it impacted my life? I think I feel like that's pretty obvious from what I've said already.
Well, you might like to add to it. How do you think because it's 2 different aspects. One, you've talked about work. You haven't mentioned home at all. How much is it, other than saying about how supportive your parents were, how much has it impacted your home life, as well as how much has it impacted your business life? I mean, what are you doing differently as a result?
I think one of the big impacts for me, and I'm guessing for a lot of other, well, I know for a number of other people's people that have been through cohorts of mine and have talked to me, later, have reported the same thing. One of the things it does, particularly after sort of day 2, day 3, is it actually erodes that artificial barrier that we put up between work and life. For folks who haven't done it, one of the things we talk about is we do this whole exercise about work-life balance and being very aware of it and deliberate of it. But one of the first things we talk about is how that is actually a terrible thing to say, work-life balance, because it implies that unless that you're either alive or you're at work. And so, it's not a good look, really. But it's for me, it has removed a lot of the distinctions in a very positive way between those two. in that I'm not a different person at work than I am in the rest of my life. And that's I think the danger of that boundary, that artificial boundary, is that we think we have to be someone else at work. I don't think that's true. I don't think it's ever been true, but I think we're discovering more and more how not only false it is, but how harmful it can be.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because the way you've spoken here, I wouldn't have thought that you had a big difference between your home and your work life before you did the Living Leader program.
Well, it was less than it used to be. I mean, when I was a theater kid, I had this idea that the business world was this very place, and mostly driven by terrible movies. And so, if I was having a theater day, I would put on my black turtleneck or whatever it was, and if I was having a temp day, an office day, I'd put on the tie and the button down and all that stuff, and it was very it felt like two very different worlds. I think that's also partly a function of youth. We in the Living Leader, we talk about the mask and about character persona, and I think it takes a certain amount of miles before you realize you don't need to wear the mask as often as you think. But I also think a huge part of the Living Leader is helping people understand that it's not only do you not need it, but it gets in the way. Most of the time. There are times when it's appropriate, but day-to-day life, including work, you don't need it as much as you think.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, go ahead. No, I was gonna flip that around. I was gonna ask you, because I'm always, this is a thing that I love to learn about people is how have you, as you have gone deeper and deeper, how have you changed? How do you spend more time without the mask?
Well, I suppose, Mac, that it goes back quite a long way. I mean, I think quite a lot of people know, but quite a lot of people don't know why it is I even designed the program in the first place. And many people just think that, I don't know, I sat down and designed it, but there was a real reason behind it. And it started, God, I can't believe it, 31 years ago when I was 50. God, I can't believe it. And I was in a really bad space. I mean, that's where my life sort of had come out. It had gone into free fall. I'd just come out of my third marriage. My wonderful second son, Phil, had just died at the age of 26. I'd lost all the money I ever had, and I was the one who brought money into all the marriages, but managed to give it away. It's very successfully. And I was not in a good space. But the other thing that had really got to me was my last husband was a really good, he called himself a leadership and management trainer. And whatever he did, I'd never put him down because he did a really good job in that people used to leave the program saying absolutely amazing, best program I've ever done. And I suppose I put him on a bit of a pedestal thinking, okay, he's really good at this. People think it's wonderful. But I used to go and meet the clients later, sometimes 3 months, 4 months, up to 6 months later, because I wanted to find out what had changed as a result. And I asked loads of questions. And the more questions that I asked, the more I became, I suppose, really confused. Because to start with, it became very obvious they'd forgotten at best 80% of it within 6 weeks. The majority of them had forgotten it completely. They just said it was a great experience. We had a wonderful time. But the more questions I asked, the thing that really I couldn't get my head around was the fact that I couldn't identify any behavior change. So if I asked them, if I asked their bosses, if I asked their bosses' bosses, they couldn't articulate any behavior change. And to me, that really, really made me uncomfortable. It didn't sit with my values at all, because what, in fact, people were saying, or companies were doing, was they were spending a huge amount of money sending people on programs where they had a great time, really loved it, but no behavior change. Now, to me, if you acquire knowledge and don't do anything different with it, you've just wasted your money. So basically, they were just pissing money into the wind. And I thought, I really don't like this. And I couldn't understand why. If they thought it was amazing and they took a lot from it, why didn't they do something with it? And I really couldn't work out why. But then on that year after I went through this major trauma and I was having to try and find out what I want to do with my life, like you, I wanted to make a difference. I couldn't identify where, but I really wanted to make a difference. And I went on I explored so many different things, qualified in different things, all sorts of things, nothing like I do now. But I went on quite a few really big name personal development programs, things like Landmark Education, Tony Robbins, things that everybody's heard of and countless people have been on. And I used to meet a lot of senior business people. And I said, how do you use what you're learning here back in the workplace? 99% of them said they didn't. They said, you can't bring this shit into workplace. I said, if you bring this in, people think you've gone mad. You're bringing in this sort of pink and fluffy stuff. You can't bring this into the workplace. And that was probably the trigger for me. I began to think, is this why so much training doesn't stick? That people have now got to remember that they've got to pick up the toolkit before they go into the workplace because they behave differently there. And they've got to remember to pick it up every time. But why do you have to be two different people? And that was the trigger for me, I guess. And I thought, I wonder if I can bring these two halves together in a way that's acceptable in the workplace. And to be honest, I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I just took everything I'd learned in that year and learned as a result of making an unholy disaster of much of my life before, and combine it with everything that I already knew about training. But could I bring these two halves together? And I remember thinking, I mean, I don't think I put this together in the most crazy way. I mean, I don't think it covered more than one sheet of paper. It was just, well, if I do this and this, and will that link, and will it? Anyway, and I remember still to this day, I managed to persuade 6 very brave people to come and pilot the program from where I lived at the time, which was a rather small dining room. But I did it in the dining room, trying to keep my 9 long-haired Jack Russells quiet in the kitchen at the same time. And it was the oddest little group because, of course, nobody knew who the hell I was. How did I persuade people to come and pilot it? And it was sort of friend or friend of friend or whatever. And it ranged from a managing director through to a housewife going through a crisis. And I did the first 2 days, and I bet my voice was shaking, and I was so nervous, and I expect my hands were sweating. You know, I should think I still can remember that feeling of, oh, what am I doing? Had no idea if it would work. And at the end of the 2 days, somebody whose name I'll never forget, Annabelle Parachia, she was head of all development training for Sun Microsystems in the UK. She said, Penny, that 2 days has changed my life. And I went, oh, hadn't got the faintest idea why. And she said, I want more people from Sun to come through the program and see what they think. And I found that I'd got a client called Sun Microsystems, and I was running this program, and I realized at that point I hadn't understood leadership. I may be teaching it, but I hadn't understood it. So then beginning to run programs for Sun Microsystems, it was just, for me, life-changing. And the other thing that I began to recognize was that leadership is incredibly simple, really, really simple. May not be easy, but it's really simple. And the more I ran the program, the more I learned about leadership. So asking how it's changed my life completely. So I designed a leadership program, realized I didn't understand leadership. And as I delivered the program, the more and more I delivered it, the more I learned. And I learned as much from my clients as they learned from me, because the more that you begin, and I'd be surprised if you don't find the same. Every time you run the program, somebody comes up with something and it gives you another insight, and you see more links forming in the brain. And so for me, it was utterly transformational. I think, and it's really funny because people will say when they go on the program, because as you know, we've got some CEOs who've been through the program 5 or 6 times. I mean, I think Paul Stobart must have been through it 7 times because he took us into every company. He even got me to run a program for him. He was adamant it was me personally. when he was CEO at Tunstall Health, and he'd qualified as a trainer. So I was thinking, oh my God, he's going to know everything. And he said he still took more from it, even hearing it again. And I still remember, I think Ems, who's my younger daughter, as you know, but also now my managing director, I think Ems came on the second program I ever ran. And then she got promoted in her company and said, oh, Mum, I want to come and do the program again. And I can remember her sitting there saying, Mum, you've changed the program. This isn't the same. You've changed the program. And I say, no, Donna, I haven't. This wasn't in it. Go back and look at your notes. And it's really interesting. So I think you hear what you're ready to hear at any particular time.
Yeah.
And that's all you need to take on board at that time. That's what you're ready to hear now. And then people do it a second time, suddenly go, oh my God, I didn't remember this bit. And it's as though you're then ready to hear it. And that's what I think so amazing. The program really, that's not entirely true. I was going to say it hasn't changed. There's one bit we took out of day 2 and replaced it with something that we thought was more important. But other than that, the program hasn't changed, which is crazy that people still take so much from it when you think, honest to God, all it is common sense. It's just not common practice. And I swear to God, you know, the impact it has on people and behavior change and sustainability is amazing. It's absolutely amazing. But I never stop learning. And by the way, I've had another question. I've been asked how, to follow up on that, Penny, how has meeting Mac and working with Mac impacted you? Okay, there we are. Thank you for that, Kristen. I think one of the things I think I knew the very first time that I came, I think it was in your pilot. I was brought in to maybe meet your group when you were delivering your pilot, and you heard I was in America and said, oh, could Penny come in and meet the group? And it was really interesting meeting you. And I think I only observed you with them a very little bit. But I remember coming out and saying, I think I said it to Helen later, he's going to be an amazing trainer. I could sense it in you very, very early on that you were going to be an amazing trainer. And of course you did, you stepped in. But the thing that I have found so fabulous as well is you've now done some programs outside of National Grid. Now, when you run programs inside National Grid, you're able to use a lot of the examples and everything that's going on in the company to relate it to the challenges, the opportunities, so you can relate everything very well. And you then got asked to go, and I think the first one you got asked to do, I think, was the Marketing Academy in America, was it?
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And of course, they're marketeers, but they're all from different companies, different organizations, different backgrounds, different everything. And that can always be the biggest challenge. But the way you just went in, and Sherilyn said you were outstanding, absolutely outstanding. And of course, then you went and did Australia. And then I think you're back doing America again this year. Is that right?
Yep.
So I think the thing that I have been blown away by, but learned, is how really good and experienced trainers can translate it into whatever industry, whatever background, whatever the organization is. They can relate what they want to impart in such a way that they get it, no matter what the industry is. So, Kristen, that's what I've really been impressed with and learned through Mac, that it's possible for people to step out and do that.
Well, can I just, if you'll suffer a little praise, a huge part of that is actually because of the way the program works. You're not, the 3 days are not, they're not ancient secrets written on a stone tablet. It's not, it's not. So let me try this again. I had heard some of the things that I then heard in the Living Leader before in other places. Again, I've had a ton of different jobs, including I've worked for marketers. I've been a marketing associate, so I had some examples in my pocket for those kids. But The difference is two things. One is the way that the material is sort of sequenced, and the flow, and the way that you talk about it, and the way you help us talk about it. Everything is connected. And I think that's one of the reasons why you see so much behavior change come out of the living leader, as opposed to some of those other things that you were talking about, is because as we're going through the 3 days, every topic we bring up, every seed we plant, every idea we offer is tied to 20 other things. And so, we get to something at the, towards the middle of day 2, and we tie it back to something we talked about earlier that morning, and something else we talked about the prior afternoon, and something that we talked about in the first 20 minutes of the conversation. And all of these things are tied together. And so when someone says, at some point during the 3 days, when someone says, "Oh, that I need to work on that. I'm gonna interrupt people less after the Rackham communicating behaviors," what they may or may not realize at the time is, in making that little behavior change here, they're also improving over here and over here and over here. And I think that's one of the reasons people get something out of it new every time, is because it's so dense, but it's also tied together. I just, yeah. So now I'm trailing off there because my brain wants to keep talking about how awesome the program is. But that is, I think, one of the reasons why it is so impactful for so many people, is that you're not like shucking the latest book, or hawking your rainbow color coded personality system, or whatever it is. And there's a ton of those, if that's what people are interested in. But you are offering people real behavioral change based on good brain science, that they can see the difference that it makes. And that's why, going back to your earlier point about, feeling like people go to these things and they're wasting their money because they don't do anything different. This is one of the reasons why people do things different after the living leader.
What do you think it is, Matt? Because I still don't know. You need to recognize that people ask me, why is it that people say the program works? But you've got to remember, I've never experienced my program.
Oh, that is a unique perspective. Yeah.
I did a couple of times, I tried to go and observe a trainer, but oh my God, they do not perform well if I'm observing. They do not, it's suddenly, oh God. And they feel the pressure, even if I don't give any pressure, they feel it. And so I cannot observe any of my trainers. I cannot observe. Okay. It was one disastrous, where a very, very senior person who went through the certified training program, and he said he'd really like me to observe him do his pilot. I thought it was a bit crazy, but he said, no, I want you to observe me. I ended up having to take over the program. He phoned me at 5:30 on the morning of day 2 and said, "It's no good, Pen. I'm not giving anything at my best." And, if he had said, "I'm struggling," I'd have said, no, we need to get you through it. But he said, these people on this program deserve to get this in a way that it's going to impact their lives. They're not going to. Will you take it? So I ended up having to take over. So, but I've never been a participant on my program, so I don't know what it is. So what is it that you think that causes you to A, do something different, and B, have it be sustainable?
Well, I mean, I can only speak for myself and the experiences that the people who've been through my cohorts have shared with me. But I think those are actually sort of two separate questions. One is what is driving behavioral change, and the other is how you make it sustainable. And I think in terms of what's driving behavioral change is I feel like I'm a broken record, but it's when you see how everything fits together, and you see how it is not a mystical formula, that it is a choice. You sit there in those 3 days, and part of it is, frankly, how much you give them. There's a menu of 1,000 things they can do differently, because they're all tied together, luckily they can pick the 4 that resonate the most for them and have impacts beyond those 4 things. But they sit there and they see, and not just from whatever the facilitator is telling them, but from what they're telling each other, from how they hash through the ideas together and discuss these concepts and these tools. They can see, oh, if I did this thing differently, I would get that different result. And when you can see how, when you're sitting there and you can say, oh, if I just turn a little bit, if I just make a little 2-degree adjustment here in my own behavior, I'm going to get that result. That's very compelling. And there's no reason, while you're sitting in that room, there's no reason not to make that change if that's the result that you want to get. So inspiring the immediate behavior change is no surprise at all to me. And maybe that's just how my brain works, but yeah, if somebody says you can do this and have this huge positive impact, of course, do it. Yeah. Where I think it gets really tricky is the sustain part. Because humans, as we talk about in the responsibility model, humans are hard to change. We have habits. We have all of this invested time in doing things the old way. And so doing things a new way, even if we try it a little bit, and even if it seems to be working out, if we take our attention off of it, if we stop being deliberate, we go back. And so the other thing that I think makes this so incredibly effective is the things that you've built into it during those 3 days that help people remain aware, remain deliberate, and continue to make those individual behavioral choices differently. I'm not sure how to describe it any better than that. Yeah, I mean, it's so many little things, but that's it. It's what you said about simple but not easy. You know, it's having that gratitude journal that is someplace annoying, and so your eye falls on it every day, and you're like, oh, I guess I got to write my I got to be thankful. Geez, right? But if you do that and you start to see the differences, it becomes self-sustaining.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. And how often do you do your gratitude book now?
It depends on the week. Mostly I do each day, but the number of things I write down is going to be very different depending on how much attention I have that day. One of the things I don't remember if it was you or Tosh who told me about this idea, but writing down the things, not just the things that you're grateful they've happened, but the things that you're grateful are going to happen.
Yeah, it's me.
And that's one of those little things that is, once you get into that habit, it just opens up so much.
Yeah, it's amazing. I went and met a group for dinner a couple of weeks ago. On the evening of day 1, I went and met, there's quite a senior group, and I went and joined them for dinner. And I got asked a question, and I thought, oh God. In fact, they asked me a lot of questions that I really had to think about. But they asked me one, I thought, God, I don't know how to answer this. I did answer it, but I'm going to see what you'd come up with. They said, okay, if there's one thing, just one thing that you think is the most important thing for you to take away from this program, what would it be? God, I found that a tricky one. I did answer it, but I'm not going to answer it. I'm going to ask you first. If there was one thing, only one, what would it be?
So my one thing takes 2 parts. But to me, this is the core of everything else. And I say this probably in the first 7 minutes. But I keep saying it because to me, this is really the heart of it. It is making those deliberate choices. And in order to do that, you have to be aware. So it's awareness and being deliberate. And if we think about the responsibility model, if we think about Rackham's communicating behaviors, if we think about the vision exercise, if we think about every module, every chapter, every conversation that we have, on some level boils down to being aware and then making a deliberate choice based on that awareness. That's it, bar none. And honestly, I think that's one of the reasons this program works so well, is because once you, it's like the Matrix, remember that movie, The Matrix? And the dude like looks out and he sees and everything's made out of zeros and ones, and he has that sort of vision. And once you have that vision, you realize how things work. Once you realize that awareness and deliberation are everything, it unlocks everything else. And when you see somebody acting in a way that is not full of awareness and deliberation, it hurts. Because that's where most of our mistakes come from, and that's where most of our accidental wounding of other people that we do all the time. It's not usually out of malice. It's something else. We're not aware. I don't know. You got me on a soapbox. What was your answer?
My answer, funnily enough, and I did have to think about it, but I think the thing that for me was the most powerful is give, get.
Yeah.
Is because that literally changed my life. When I think back to what I was like, and I say casually to people, I had no confidence. I mean, I really had no confidence. I could no more have attended one of my programs, let alone delivered it. I was an absolute mess. I wouldn't have been able to, if I'd joined the program, I'd have been shaking. You'd have heard my voice shaking. I wouldn't have been able to pick up my coffee cup. I would have been like this. My hands would have been sweating. I really was very, very bad. And it doesn't really matter how I discovered it now, because it's too long a story to share. And it does get shared actually on the program. But suddenly, through somebody being a catalyst and helping me recognize that every time I had a confidence problem, I was thinking about me. I was worried about me. Would I be okay? Would people like me? Would they think what I was doing was great? Without even being aware of it, every time that I had a confidence problem, I couldn't say that to the client. What would they think about me? I couldn't ask that question. They'd think I'm stupid because why didn't I know the answer already? Everything without being aware of it was my concern about me. Would I look stupid? Would I be a fool? Etc. And of course, the more you begin to recognize it, that's all about get. And we have no control over get. We just don't have it. We'd like people to like us. We'd like people to care for us, be polite to us, be nice to us. Lots of things that we'd like people to treat us in a particular way. But that's all about get, and we don't have control over it. And that for me was the biggest wake-up call, because once I realized that, I thought, well, what is it I do have control over? What I have control over is what I give. And that's what changed my life. And even, I remember you said earlier in our conversation, you said sometimes that belief is still a little bit gets in the way for you. Well, it still gets in the way for me. Okay, I've got a toolkit how to work with it. But it's very easy to slip back again. And I know that there are times, I'm not as bad now, anything like, but in the earlier days where I was doing speaking engagements, and probably some of the bigger ones, which was the YPO or Birmingham, when I was on stage, about 1,000 people, and I was about this big on the stage, like a little pea walking up and down the stage. And before you go on, all that absolute feeling of panic and sweat and everything begins to break out. And I'd always just ask the question, who am I thinking about right now? And it would always be about, am I going to be okay? Am I going to do an okay job? Are they going to like me? Are they going to understand what I'm talking about? And I just used to be there in the back. If I knew that there's one or two things I can give people in this room that will give me another insight, make their life that little bit better, what would I choose to give? If I absolutely knew that by giving somebody the opportunity to hear what I think and feel, it may enable them to see something differently. It was always about, and finding any questions that allowed me to focus on give. That changed my life. So for me, there's so many other things, but that for me was absolutely transformational.
I love give and get. I love it so much. One of the things that I say when we get there is that if you think of it in terms of ROI, like bang for your buck, give and get is maybe the most powerful thing, the most powerful single bit, because it's 5 minutes, it's 10 minutes, you know, and it's one of those things that when someone lifts the veil and helps you think about it that way, you get it really fast. But if you apply it consistently, and again, you have to be deliberate about it, you have to take that moment of pause and say, you know, proactive, reactive, you have to take that moment and say, am I thinking about the give or am I thinking about the get? I'm going to choose to think about the give. If you do that consistently, the rewards for that little 10 seconds of self-awareness are exponential. It's huge.
Yeah. One of the other things I'm curious about, I learned more about you today on this conversation in your background. I didn't know some of all that acting and directing and everything stuff that you've talked about. As a matter of curiosity, because you did that acting and directing and all of that side, how much do you think it's helped you become a successful trainer?
I think it 100% it prepared me for sort of the performative aspect of it, you know, getting in front of a bunch of people and talking to them, being able to not just perform it in the sense of like speaking lines, but to be able to actually make that into a conversation. That probably is a little more the director side of it. Not just not being fussed about walking into a room of strangers and connecting with them and guiding them through something, like all of that kind of thing. A performing arts background can absolutely help you with. Another one of my temp jobs was actually teaching public speaking, and so I have, you know, there's some additional preparation there as well. But I think that, yeah, you know, well, I certainly think that's helpful, and I actually think it's helpful just for business generally. I have a number of friends over the years who pivoted from theatrical things to business things, and they're generally quite successful, because in theater you have to be able to deal with all of the intangibles, and you have to be incredibly flexible and able to pivot, and all of that stuff tends to serve people well. But I don't think that not doing those things would keep anyone from being an absolutely stellar trainer, because it's baked into the material itself. It's exactly what you were saying, give get. Don't walk into the room and say, oh, I hope I remember everything. I hope they like how I give them, you know, how I hope they laugh at my jokes or whatever. It's about, in every moment, what can I give them now? Oh, there's this person who I can tell by the way they're talking, they haven't really sussed the concept. They're kind of 5 degrees off. What other example can I give them? Maybe if I ask them a question and relate it back to their situation, maybe that'll make it click. I think it's all there. I don't think you have to be an actor. In fact, it may get in your way because you have that thing of like, I have to read my script, and that's not what facilitation is.
Yeah. And I think you're absolutely right. It is keeping it's just almost living and breathing the principles. There's no question. How is it possible to keep it alive in an organization, especially when you've got one that's the size of your organization, which is huge?
Yeah, I think it takes I say it again, I think it takes being aware, and I think it takes being deliberate. We have, within the customer organization at National Grid, we have a small group of people who are sort of the steering committee for Living Leader internally, and we're always talking about that. And then we have a double handful of certified trainers who deliver the program, and we meet with them on the regs and you know, hear their feedback from people. But I think the probably single biggest thing is, once these ideas are in the air, wherever you are, and it's at a business, at a scout troop, at a church, at a whatever, not just work, life. But once these ideas are in the air, if people bring them up actively in their conversations, that helps. And so there's a certain sort of tipping point where enough people have become familiar with the concepts that they can have conversations very casually and small. Again, it's those small behavior changes. We have on my team, we've all been to the Living Leader, and we have really good relationships, and so we'll call each other out, oh, you shut that guy out, or even, hey, why are you shutting me out, or good job bringing that person in, and just those little touches to me are as important as whatever giant poster email that comes down and says this is what we will do, because those we're all going to try this thing now emails can get forgotten really fast if they're not lived. There's a sort of flavor of the week feeling to a lot of those kinds of. It's funny. I have a friend who works at a different company, and she called me up the other day and asked if she could pick my brain. Their company doesn't do much of anything for people who are newly promoted to managing others, to being people leaders. They just sort of say, hey, great, you made it to this desk, here are the keys, good luck. And she was, I think, rightfully offended by that. And so called me up. It's like, hey, I'm putting together a little sort of book club mentoring group for these people who have all in the last couple of months been promoted into positions of leadership, positional leadership, and I want to pick your brain about that. And so we sat down, and inevitably, it feels like the conversation turned to, what book can I read? What personality assessment can I take? And I don't have anything against those things. There's a ton of them out there, and most of them have some sort of, you are a unicorn, you are a hawk. And some of them have more and better science behind them. Some of them have less. Some of them have no science at all. There's one that everybody loves that literally, if you read into it, they just sat around a kitchen table and made it up. But I think what they do is, for a short time, while somebody's excited about it, they bring awareness and deliberation. And so I think of them as tarot cards. There are people who like do tarot card readings, who have, like, they'll tell you there's nothing magic about this. We lay these things out and we look at your life and it makes you think about things. And it's the thinking about things that has the power. And so I think of all of these, you're a purple hawk, you're a red raccoon sort of things as tarot cards. They for a small amount of time, they focus your attention and make you think about stuff. And so stuff seems to get better. And of course it does, because you're thinking about it. One of the things I think that makes the Living Leader different is that it's not that. It gives you, first of all, there's really good science behind it. And second of all, it gives you actual behavior changes as opposed to a sticker. But again, like, awareness and deliberation is all. And those top-down things can make awareness and deliberation happen for a short amount of time. It's not self-sustaining. You've got to get stuff in the day-to-day breathing habits of people to keep it going. And once again, I've run down a rabbit hole. I'm sorry about that.
No, that's okay. It's absolutely no problem. Yeah, it's one of the things that I find fascinating. There's some people I've had conversations with on here who really do live it and breathe it. Andrew Cannon's one. He used to be with Voyage Care. I know he's moved on. I can't remember the name of the company he's moved on to now, but no doubt it won't be long before we're working with him again. Paul Stobart, he's another one. Chris Weston. They absolutely did their damnedest to walk the talk of every minute of every day. And really, really interesting how they know that you can't do it on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, but forget on Tuesday and Thursday. You know, it's every minute of every day, because if you only slip once, people say, oh, it's not real. You know, so it's being able to hold on to it all the time. That's
absolutely. And I'm so sorry to interrupt you, Penny, but you hit on something really important there, and another thing that makes the living leader different, I think. Yes, you have to walk the talk, and you have to do it every second that you can. But when you slip, that is also a difference, because if you forget that you're supposed to be an orange ostrich that day, nobody cares. If you forget that you're supposed to appreciate your people and want to help them develop and be genuinely grateful for who they are, if you forget that and slip, people care.
Yeah.
But we're all people. And one of the differences about the sort of things that we talk about in the living leader is you hopefully are at a place where you can say, I messed up.
Yeah.
You know, and own it. And the people around you will realize that you are a human, and they'll keep working with you anyway.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think it's key to be able to say, oh, I screwed up there. And that sometimes that's one of the things that I think you learn with the program, is how to have the courage to do those things. So, Matt, we haven't got very long left. I want to ask you one last question. Okay. You've talked about your very interesting changes of career, from, you know, actor to energy to leadership train. What's your vision now?
Oof, that's a really good question. I'm still trying to make things better. I would, if I could wave a magic wand and just make a position for myself somewhere, I think I would try to find a way to, one that we haven't really talked about it very much in this hour, but I also have a very passionate desire for making things better through process improvement. And so if I could somehow marry these two ideas of personal leadership and process improvement, that would be the ideal. And to me, it is an easy fit, because what you're doing is making everyone aware and deliberate, and giving them all of these good practices, and then getting all of the things that create friction out of their way. That's the process improvement part of it. So if you could somehow make everyone the best they can be and get all the roadblocks out of their way, that would be huge.
Okay. So if you knew that you can find a way to either create or do this, what are the first steps you'd take?
I'm going to note for the record that you're incisive questioning me. And again, if you'll suffer a little bit of praise, you are so good at that. You are my Yoda where asking questions is involved. I want to be you someday, because it's such an incredibly useful technique. It does so much for the person that you're talking to. Yeah. Anyway, so that's sideline. How would I do that? I think I think what I would have to do first, and I realize I just used the words have to, but I think in order to sequence this effectively, I think other people would have to share that vision, and then I could help them achieve that vision. So I guess the first thing I would have to do is sort of spread the word about Living Leader, which we're doing. So that's great. Step one. And maybe more explicitly marry those two ideas together of personal leadership and process. But I'll tell you honestly, that's a fun sort of exercise for me. But I don't feel at this moment that I have done enough where I am.
Okay.
I have so many things I want to make better for so many people, that I think continuing to do what I'm doing now, with as much delivering living leader training to in as many places as I can get along the way, I'd die a happy man.
Well, I think you've had a lovely comment from Mary Beth. You do this every day, Mac. So so I think that you've got a lot of fans out there, Mac. Of that, I'm absolutely sure. So Mac, I think we've just about, God, we have, it's 1 o'clock, an hour has gone. Mac, thank you for joining me today. I'm absolutely thrilled, and I hope that you've shared a lot of insights with people that'll make them even more interested. Now, what I will say, if anybody does wish to email you, you've got a Living Leader email address, have you?
I don't think I have a Living Leader email address, but they can reach me on LinkedIn. I'd love to have a Living Leader email address, and I can drop a personal email address as well in the chat for this.
Okay, well, if you'd like to do that, then if anybody would like to contact you with follow-up questions, there may be people who say, I've been really interested to hear this. I'd like to find out more about either the program or becoming a trainer or whatever. So if people want to contact you and ask you any questions, you're happy for that to happen, are you, Mac?
Absolutely. I'm a true believer, and you were thanking me, but to me, this is an opportunity for me to spend another hour picking your brain. So yeah, 100%. I would recommend. I often hear like people think they have to be a certain size or they have to be a certain kind of whatever, and I'll just try to dispel that myth. I think this is helpful to anyone of any size. So yeah, anything I can do.
Good. Mac, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you,
And
Penny.
I'm sure that we will get to meet in a country sooner or later again. Take
That
care.
would be awesome. Bye.
Lots of love. Bye-bye.